Good morning, and welcome to those of you joining us virtually and those of you present here at All Souls Unitarian Church of Indianapolis. I am so glad to see you all this morning. I am Sandy Reed Ryberg, serving as the worship associate for today's worship service, my first time since recovering from hip replacement surgery. Thank you. If you are visiting us this morning, we are so glad you are here with us. We welcome you and invite you to bring with you this morning your whole self and all of your lived experience as you join us in worship. This morning, the 2-year anniversary of everything shutting down for the coronavirus. Our interim minister, Reverend Joel Miller, who is serving us until we call our new minister, will address the current crisis in Ukraine and will consider this situation in light of the 5th of the 7 principles by which Unitarians currently view our religious practice. That principle has to do with the use of the democratic process within our congregation and the wider world, and the right of conscience involved in that process. I'm always reminded when thinking of the democratic process of the remark attributed to Winston Churchill that democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the others that have been tried. And that is the reason that people for hundreds of years have given their lives to preserve the practice of democracy and are doing so today in Ukraine. I know Reverend Joel will give us a way to consider this situation using our right of conscience. In a few moments, we will open our service with our beautiful ritual of repeating the covenant that you see on the wall above me and of lighting our chalice as we renew our promise to live into our covenant. Simply put, our purpose as a congregation is to put love into action. Not always an easy process. We say our covenant together as a way to remember and live out the community of love and justice that we aim and hope to be. Again, welcome, and let us worship together.
Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Tanya Marquez writes these opening words. It is a wonder and a mystery that our paths have crossed, that in the immensity of time, in the vastness of space, we coincide here. I am in awe at the ways in which our lives intersect, intertwine, at the beauty we create when we are together. May our coming together make us more compassionate, more just, more caring, more loving. May our hearts and minds be open to this offering. I am so glad you are here. So now let us worship. Let us marvel at the miracle of being here now with each other and the mystery that brings us together and brings life to this very world. Welcome.
That you're maintaining ties with all souls during the week, to let us know
that is ongoing.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning.
Morning.
Ooh, need some oil on that. Hi, I'm Ron Keeper, and I've been asked to remind everybody that we'd like to close out the pledge drive for this year this Wednesday. So if you are like me in past years, but not this year, and have procrastinated until the last few days, please be aware that, as I said, we're wanting to close it down this Wednesday, or Thursday anyway. It's St. Patrick's Day. So that's all I need to say. And, we're looking forward, obviously, to getting a new minister in and rejoining the church on a weekly basis with all the upgrades we've had over the last few years. So welcome back and get the pledge cards in. Thanks a lot. I believe there's a box in the atrium. Is that right? It's still there. Okay. And there are coffee cups there too. If you don't have enough coffee cups at home, feel free to take one.
Thanks, Ron.
At this time, Kevin Jasko will light our chalice for us as we recite the words of the covenant on the wall behind us. Let's see. There you go. Good job. Whoops. Perfect. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Good job.
I don't get up quite as well as I used to yet. My reading this morning is a poem by Anne Weems. Anne passed away in 2016 at the age of 81. She was an author of books such as Reading for Rainbows, Kneeling in Jerusalem, Kneeling in Bethlehem, with beautiful poetry. And the poem she was known as the Presbyterian Poet Laureate, but I think she might have had a touch of Unitarian in her as well. And the poem is entitled, I No Longer Pray for Peace. On the edge of war, 1 foot already in, I no longer pray for peace. I pray for miracles. I pray that stone hearts will turn to tender-heartedness, and evil intentions will turn to mercifulness. And all the soldiers already deployed will be snatched out of harm's way, and the whole world will be astounded onto its knees. I pray that all the God talk will take bones and stand up and shed its cloak of faithlessness, and walk again in its powerful truth. I pray that the whole world might sit down together and share its bread and its wine. Some say there is no hope, but then I've always applauded the holy fools who never seem to give up on the scandalousness of our faith, that we are loved by God, that we can truly love one another. I no longer pray for peace. I pray for miracles.
Good morning again. Do you know what? I have been playing a game called Wordle lately. Has anybody else here been playing? Yeah, I see you. Sometimes I see you on Facebook too. And there've been all of these spin-offs. There's one called Quirtle, where you're trying to find 4 words at the same time, right? There's all sorts of different games, and there's a Shakespearean one, and there's one about geography, and it's not called Wordle. Follow along with me here, it's called Worldle. So I was playing Wordle yesterday, and I could tell I was looking for an island. And I looked and looked and looked, and I looked in the middle of nowhere, and it said, it's east of this place in the middle of nowhere, and it's west of this place in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, there's nothing there. And I finally found it, but do you know what I found out when I had to go and look it up on Wikipedia to even understand what this place was? I found out that humanity, right after we discovered it, we lost it for 70 years. This little tiny island, we couldn't find it at all. Somebody wrote down the coordinates wrong, and it's so tiny, and it's so much in the middle of nowhere that we just were like, well, we'll find it again eventually. Sometimes the way we think about places can be kind of funny. For example, there's a place in Europe called Transylvania. And if I say the word Transylvania anywhere outside of this room, what's the first thing that people are going to say to me? Dracula, vampires, yeah, 100, not the sparkly kind, like older than that, yeah. So we do think of vampires when we think of Transylvania, but it's actually a very important place for Unitarians. And I think this will kind of be interesting to you kids because there was a time when a young man named John Sigismund became the king of Transylvania, and he was really just a young adult. He was not very old. And I think that sounds very scary, to all of a sudden have to be king of a whole country when I'm just figuring myself out. That whole idea freaks me out. Like imagine if just like you woke up one day and your father passed away and someone was like, well, that's it, you're in charge. It would freak me out. And it was not very easy for him because at the time people were arguing about God a lot in his country and everywhere. Calvinists were arguing, Lutherans were arguing, Roman Catholics were arguing, and they were mad at the Calvinists and the Lutherans for leaving the Roman Catholic Church to start their own. And some of the people arguing in Transylvania were Unitarians. And finally, John Sigismund said, listen, in order to get this all sorted out, I'm so tired of listening to all the arguments. We're going to all get in one room, and we're going to debate, and you guys are going to tell me your best ideas, and we're going to figure this out, because this can't be all I do all the time, is listen to you argue about this. Which, if you're a parent, you have probably had a similar conversation. So he got everyone into one room, and there was a particular Unitarian named Francis David, and I mention this in part because he didn't start out Unitarian. Raise your hand if you didn't start out Unitarian. Yeah, a whole bunch of us. He had tried a lot of different religions, and as he kept thinking about his theology and as he kept thinking about his God beliefs, he kept moving around till he found the right place. And he finally thought, yeah, I'm a Unitarian, that's what I am. And because he'd done so much thinking about it, he made a really good argument. He made such a good argument that guess what? King John Sigismund became a Unitarian. And you might think when you hear this, when I study history, what I notice is that when kings and queens change religions, they often try to make everybody else change religions with them. And so you might be worried that that would happen. But that is not what happened here. Because part of being a Unitarian was saying, hey, listen, I got here by thinking carefully, using my right of conscience to decide what I believe. And that's something I think everybody should be able to do. And that's what King John Sigismund decided. He decided, yep, that's how Transylvania is going to be while I'm king. It's going to be a place where people can decide for themselves what they believe. And so today, when Reverend Joel is telling you about our fifth principle, about democracy, which means we all decide together, and about the right of conscience, which means what I think when I think really hard matters. I want you to remember that that's a right that you have, and that it's a right you can make sure others around you have as well. Thank you.
One of the things I've discovered is that for my conscience to work, it's best if I empathize with others. Try to understand how others are feeling. That's especially important in a time like now, as I watch the people in Ukraine suffering and empathize with them and learn to admire how some of them are risking everything, their lives, everything they have, to defend their freedom. That's how much it means to them. Strangely, even to empathize with the people doing the terrible evil that's happening there, the invasion, the shelling of hospitals. Perhaps not so much to, really not at all to excuse it, but to understand my own humanity. Sharing of joys and sorrows, yes, it's for community, but it's also a spiritual practice to understand how truly human we are, how truly alive we are if we extend the joys and sorrows to everything in the world around us. For our joys and sorrows as we celebrate them today, the ones that we name out loud, in addition to all of this of joys and sorrows we brought, Robert Olson was a member of All Souls actually for over 60 years. I just looked it up. He died on Thursday. His partner, his wife Patricia, died in 2008, and she'd been a member for almost 50 years. A memorial service is being planned. We also have sorrows today, of course, with the Ukrainian people and their suffering of the violence of Russia's dictatorship. They suffer much in the way that the people of Syria were terrorized, also by Russian dictators and Syria's dictator. We have joys today. Our nursery reopened this morning. I was so excited about it that I actually stopped by last night to turn on the heat to make sure the babies would be warm. Our joys today are with the courageous people fighting for Ukraine's democracy and freedom. And it's both a joy and a sorrow to remember that it was 2 years ago that COVID arrived, that we went to virtual services. There are the sorrows of probably 2 million Americans who died, and I don't know how many people on this earth, many more than we've counted, we know. But joys also. The joys of science that brought us amazing vaccines. So many of us can be here now. We can be here in relative safety because of the joys of our science, our reason, our community. And for me, I want to emphasize what a joy it is to be here with you at All Souls. You're wearing your masks. The courage of your kindness to do that allows others to attend with the safety that they may need. Your practice of Unitarian Universalism, your kindness with the masks, you create a place where we are truly creating the possibility of freedom. Freedom is not something we have alone. Freedom is something we give one another. And for you, for All Souls, it is a great joy today. Thank you. Spirit of Life, we're here today because we believe what we do matters. We are here because we believe how we live our lives matters. That with every act of kindness or every act of meanness, an act of courage or fear, love or hate, with all of these, we are weaving the fabric of the universe. We are weaving together life itself. We come here because we need encouragement, a fullness of heart and life, because we need strength, because we can get so distracted We can be so overcome by how we feel. We get in a rush to get to work, to get food on the table, to do the laundry, and we forget. And so we choose something easy to do instead of something that's harder, when really it was the harder path we should have chosen. The harder path is what our souls, our spirits truly long for. We're here because none of us is perfect, but we aspire to something greater, even than what we believe we're now capable of. We aspire, and so we come here to be inspired, to try again, to take another step, to find courage again, to find strength again. And because when it just gets so hard, to remember to laugh and to know joy. We are here for ourselves, but we're here for each other. We're here for this world. We're here for them. We are here because how we live matters. And how we live matters because it shapes everything that is. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.
This is the time when we take our offering, and in general, we share our offering with an organization that shares our values. But today, 100% of our offertory contributions will be going to the Hungarian Unitarian Church's Providence Fund. It's a charity service, and our Unitarian churches in Hungary and Romania are a big part of the effort to support the more than 200,000 Ukrainian refugees. That number is probably higher as I speak. I'd like to read a statement from Gondesheli Segerserveja, I hope I've said that right, who describes the situation there right now. In Transylvania, refugees enter through two border points, about 180 kilometers or 110 miles from Cluj-Kolozsvár, the headquarters of the Hungarian Unitarian Church. Your donation will provide women and families immediate aid, such as transportation from the border, emergency shelter, food, water, hygiene kits, infant supplies, clothing, pet care, and psychological support. Ukrainian refugees and those internally displaced urgently need our support. You can help ensure that families fleeing war in Ukraine know they are not alone at this most devastating moment in their lives. So please give generously. That's from Gondesheli Segerserveja. So this morning, as I mentioned, all of our offertory contributions will go to the Providence Fund for the Hungarian Unitarian Church, and you can visit our link that is posted in the chat if you're online, or you can go to allsoulsindy.org where you will find a link that says Give to All Souls here on the left-hand side beneath the description for today's service. The rest of us will be giving here, and thank you for your generosity in supporting the mission of All Souls and for your continued love for one another and others. May we now accept our morning offering. Thank you.
For those of you online, please follow the link in your order of service or go online to donate at allsoulsindy.org. We're not on Zoom and there's no live chat.
principle in some time. The fifth principle of the Unitarian Universalist Association, to affirm and promote the use of the democratic process in our congregations and in the world around us, and to support each other in the free use of our conscience. I suppose I should have been thinking a lot about it. I mean, I've been working with your Board of Trustees on policy governance, which is a way to truly enact democracy. That is, the will of the congregation, the vision of the congregation for what its ministry will be, how you're going to serve each other and the world around you. I sort of hadn't made the linkage. But it became really important to me, of course, in the last couple of weeks, as I got to think. I've been watching the reports on what's happening in Ukraine. Conscience becomes very important to me in a moment like that. I can imagine myself wanting to go to Ukraine and fight with them for freedom. I can imagine even more than that. Not exactly proud of this, but I can get very, very angry when I see the injustice done to others. Some of you may remember there were some shootings at a school called Sandy Hook some years ago. That was about 10 years ago. And you know, having been the minister of the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church, I've mentioned in earlier sermons having seen some violence at a school. When it happened again, that 10 years later that followed, 2011, 2012, around there, I was so angry. And I found myself planning. This is the part I'm really not proud of. I was planning a way to get retribution, revenge, against the guys in the NRA who promote guns as a way to solve problems. I don't want to debate about guns as tools. Actually, I don't think that's itself an especially important conversation. But I feel so passionately about what I know to be true, that the kind of love that we create in community, the kind of bonds of community we create at a place like All Souls, that's what saves lives. That's what solves problems. And touting guns as a way to solve problems that have to be solved from the depths of our hearts and from our conscience and our ability to know compassion for others, that's never going to happen at the barrel of a gun. And it wasn't until the next day when I woke up and I was still planning revenge that I realized that's not who I want to be. And I'm a minister. I was a minister. I am a minister. And I think, what am I doing? Putting so much of my life and energy into that kind of thought of violence. I can't see myself fighting for freedom. I think I would pick up arms for that. But I loved how I saw in the news reports Ukrainian soldiers talking about fighting for freedom. They weren't speaking in hatred of the Russian soldiers. In fact, most of them conscripts who had no desire to be there, no desire to be taking anybody's freedom. And they knew it. They were fighting for love, not for revenge or retribution. It's easy to become cynical, angry, when looking at the news and seeing what human beings can do to one another. But I was reminded by a friend earlier this week that, well, if you're cynical about, oh yeah, things are just always going to, turn out kind of badly, people are always going to be selfish, you're going to end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's always a way to be proven right. But to live by love, to live by hope, We've been listening to Beethoven this morning. And I loved Beethoven as a kid growing up Unitarian Universalist. I loved Beethoven because of the hopefulness in the music that I heard. And in fact, because of the idea of human freedom and what we can do in community for each other. We're going to sing a hymn at the end of the service. It's called Joy Thou Goddess, and it's based on a German poem by a guy named Schiller. And it's about the spirit of life flowing through us and giving us courage for living in beauty and joy with one another, even if it costs us everything. How else should we live? That same kind of bright spirit that is by which some Ukrainians are fleeing with their children to places of safety, and other Ukrainians are staying to fight for the freedom of their country. I can still sing the first lines of the hymn in German, actually, Beethoven's music. Freude, schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium, wir betreten feuertrunken himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mutter streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. So democracy. It takes me back to this fifth principle that we live by. And as I remember it, we are part and parcel of the roots of democracy, at least in the United States, if not in many parts of Europe. The Edict of Torda from King John, talking about the possibility of living together in peace, even with our differences or because of our differences. So we are not just the Puritans, but we're the Pilgrims. And they're actually two, don't ever conflate them, especially if you go to New England, because the historians will be really mad at you. So we're the Puritans, and we know that we're the Puritans because of the way we call ministers or organize our congregations. The building, the decisions about your building, for example, that's by vote of the people. When you call your next minister, it will be by a vote of the people. There's no boss somewhere that tells you who your minister is going to be. That's because of our roots in democracy, spiritual democracy. And then likewise, the Pilgrims, who were decidedly not Puritans, actually, when they came and, ended up in what's now Massachusetts. They were supposed to go to Virginia. And they realized, our mistake, we ended up where we wanted to end up. They realized they had to form a government because there would be no government otherwise. And they formed a thing called the Mayflower Compact and decided that would be how they would govern themselves, as equals. So we look at the Declaration of Independence. You can see the roots of our own spiritual tradition in the Declaration of Independence, in which the language said, all men are created equal. And we have the right to pursue our happiness, to live our lives, to expect justice. The founding idea of the United States itself, well, it was an idea. It wasn't always very well implemented. We were still enslaving some people. Women weren't exactly men. I don't know how that was supposed to work, and we were forcing the people who were already living here off of their lands. It was far from perfect. So when Sandy was talking about Winston Churchill saying, it's the worst form of government except all the rest of them, we clearly not done it always too terribly well, but we're doing it and have been a light to so many other peoples in the world. We've had crises many times in our history. The crisis of the Civil War. Were we truly going to give all people freedom? We fought a war over it because there were a group of people who believed that, no, all people shouldn't have freedom. Some people should own other people, and that should be okay, because it's good for some people to be rich and others to be enslaved to those rich people. Fortunately, the right side was victorious in that war. But we struggled again in the 1890s. There was a class of people with a huge proportion of America's wealth. Andrew Carnegie said, it is right that some people live in great vast houses and some people live in little huts, because those who live in the vast houses have special abilities, and they should be rewarded for using their special abilities properly. We went through the same argument again in the 30s. In fact, the grandfather of one of our presidents tried to overthrow the United States to replace it with a dictatorship. We're going through that again even now, with some who believe that we can take away the right of some to vote based on their color or their heritage, the language they speak. Perhaps even that we ought to simply do away with democracy altogether and just declare somebody the leader. We could end up easily with somebody like Vladimir Putin. In fact, if I think about it now, the past president actually still thinks Vladimir Putin's a great guy. Said so this week. In human history, there have always been those sociopathic guys who look around the village and say, I want to be the one in charge. And with whatever bullying they have at their disposal, put themselves up as the lord of the area, or eventually the king or the emperor or the sultan or the emir, the duke, the prince, president for life. What are some of the current terms? Beloved leader, there are all kinds of terms for these guys. It can be really hard not to get cynical. It's hard for me not to get cynical. I get really angry. And then I remember, what is it we're doing here? The beauty of the spirits living in each of us here, the fire in your eyes that I see, the wonder, the beauty in the memorial garden, and the legacy left to us. It's been a struggle. It's been a fight. It will continue to be a fight. When we gather in community, we can find again the courage, the hope that we need. We can find a way not to have to be cynical, to give up. But what does that look like? How does that happen? I think it was about 14 years ago. A young man who had grown up in the congregation I was serving then in Buffalo, New York. He and his wife came to me. Their son, Asa, had died in a car crash the day before. They were bereft. They were heartbroken. Asa's father had grown up in Sunday school at the Unitarian Universalist Church and was very active in the African American community in Buffalo. Bright, full of life. Asa had been just like his father, bright, full of life, engaging people, laughing, looking for the things that are beautiful, impatient with meanness, with cynicism. And Asa's mother, Eritrean, from the northeastern part of Africa. And when there had been genocide there, terrible things had happened there. She had been 14 years old. She walked across the continent of Africa to be free and to be safe. Africa's a big place. It's like as big as 3 United States. She walked across the whole thing for freedom. So they came to me and we wanted to celebrate Aza's life. And it was going to be, we knew it was going to be, there were a lot of people going to come to this memorial celebration of Aza's life. And so we started planning it. We knew we'd have to put some speakers out on the lawn. We knew there'd be more than the 600 people we could really jam into the sanctuary at the UU church there. So we had speakers and monitors outside for other folks we expected might come. And we began planning the music to try to represent all of the different cultural roots that were important to this family: Unitarian Universalism, America's African American traditions and heritage, something from the culture of Eritrea. And as we were planning, then Aza's parents said to me, "And we would like you to marry us." And I thought for a moment, wait. Okay, yeah, we could do that, but let's finish planning the memorial first. And they said, "No, we would like you to marry us in the memorial." And I had to think about that for a minute. I'd never done that before. And I confess I've never done it since, but it does sound a little odd. Wait a minute, you want me to do you to get married? You're going to get married in the memorial service. And they said, yes, we want to do that. It had been Aza's wish that we would marry, that we would get married. He wanted his parents to be married. And we do love each other. And we want to celebrate his life. And this just feels like the best possible way we can say yes to all that he gave us, the joy that he's left us with. I took a deep breath, and not having ever done anything like that before, and said a little prayer of thanks also, because I was glad I was a Unitarian Universalist and could say yes to that. I know in most other religions it'd be like, no, you can't, just no. But whose voice was supposed to be in that moment? Aza's? Yes. His parents? Yes. But there was another important voice that I learned about. And it was during the service itself that I learned about this voice. And I came to understand what it takes to live a life of courage. Not to be consumed by cynicism or rage or anger. There were over 1,000 people gathered at the church that afternoon when we had the memorial celebration of Aza's life. The sanctuary was full. We had guest preachers who were sharing in the service, and there were so many people from Buffalo's African American community. And I don't know if you've ever worshiped in an African American church, in a black church. So if you have, you would know that as I'm standing here being a preacher, I might have people saying, yeah, preach it, Joel, preach it. Or I might be telling a hardness of story. I might be confessing to the fact that sometimes I find myself thinking about thoughts of revenge and retribution, and nodding heads like, yeah, no, yeah, we don't want to do that, do we? Helping me out a little bit. And it's an amazing feeling to be able to do that. Now, here we were in the memorial. The same thing was happening. It's talking about how Asa, this bright, beautiful boy, and he would just smile at you, and you couldn't help but feel yourself well up with your own smile. Those who knew him just, yeah, preach it, Joel. That's it. And we were celebrating his life. We were focused on the joy. And I was struggling a little bit with that because, having grown up Unitarian Universalist, I had noticed as a young adult that sometimes we would do the joy, although in our very white, not too emotional way. As humanists, when I was growing up, we were a little uncomfortable with too much emotion, kind of probably because of our Puritan roots, where you weren't supposed to be emotional, you were supposed to be rational. I was learning at the time that actually, no, we're emotional beings, we're mammals. You got to be emotional. It helps you understand what it is you're thinking and why. And so I was a little confused because there was this celebration of Aza's life, but I wasn't seeing many tears yet, and I wasn't sure what that meant. I finished the eulogy. We got to a peak about the amazing experience of what it had been to be parents of a child who was so joyful, so happy at being alive, and how he had this way of drawing his family's attention, his friends' attention, to things that were beautiful, to things that were funny. He was a gentle, loving tease. The congregation responded back, yes, 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 preach it, yes. And then it was time for the wedding. There wasn't an order of service, so really only about 5 people knew that the wedding was going to happen. And so I began to explain to the more than 1,000 people there that, and now Aza's parents, who loved him so much, realized his wish for them was to get married. And so now they are going to take hands, and they are going to marry in front of us. And the entire group of people, except for the five of us who knew already this was happening, just stared at me like, you're going to do what? So I explained it a second time. We're concluding this memorial with the best way we know to celebrate Aza's life. His parents want to acknowledge the joy he brought to life around him and to their lives. And what better way than for them to take hands and wed right now. And then the congregation began to, in all of the different ways that they worshiped and expressed themselves spiritually, praise yes, thank you, Jesus. Yes, Lord. And then the tears started to flow. And the congregation cried out, yes. And they took hands, and the congregation said, yes, yes, yes. And we said the vows, and after each vow, yes, yes. And when I declared his parents married, the congregation erupted in shouts of joy. Yes. And then I realized what was happening. Aza's parents were refusing to sink into just despair, not to ignore their grief or their loss, but not to just get lost in despair or cynicism. 2 parents who had seen so much loss. A black man in America who couldn't walk the street without wondering if he'd get home safely every day of his life. A mother from Eritrea. She saw, who knows what she saw in her terrible walk across a continent. But they refused to be cynical. Their son, who lit up the world with joy and light, they wanted to take his bequest to them and live the same way. And I realized this is how we survive. This is how we continue to fight for something like the 5th principle, for democracy. This is how those soldiers in Ukraine at this very moment remember what it is they're willing to even die for the joy of being alive, of being able to come here and sing, to remember how the people who came before us left us this building, left us this music. They did it out of their joy for what they knew about life and being connected and what they knew was possible for us. And no one can take that away. No dictator can take our joy away. So this song Joy Thou Goddess. What's the number of the hymn? 327. So it's 327. It's in those gray hymn books. We'll sing the English. You've heard the German already. So remember joy. The great lesson the great gift of knowledge I was given by the African American people in the church that day, 14 years ago. A way of being in the life of people who know what it is to be a refugee, know what it is to suffer. Return to joy. Don't let cynicism or despair take over your soul. So we'll sing it. Joy, thou goddess, fair, immortal, offspring of Elysium, mad with rapture to the portal of thy holy fane we come. Fashion's laws indeed makes ever, but thy magic joins again. Humankind is one forever, 'neath thy mild and gentle reign. Joy in nature's wide dominion, mightiest cause of all is found, and 'tis joy that moves the pinion when the wheel of time goes round. From the bud she lures the flower, suns from out their orbs of light. Distant spheres obey their power, far beyond all mortal sight. Please be seated. As you go out into the world now, although hopefully you'll stay for the congregational meeting, as we exercise that tradition of democracy in our spiritual community, remember that light of love, of joy. And when you have lost it, call up a friend, call up your minister, listen to some freedom music, perhaps some Beethoven. Know that you don't have to do this alone. There is always the spirit of love, and that there are always friends ready to be with you through all of these journeys, however hard, however joyful. Go in peace, be in peace. We are together, and will be together again and again.